In the midst of a bustling airport, an ordinary morning turned extraordinary, thanks to one loyal German Shepherd Rex. While the crowd moved through the terminal, oblivious to what was unfolding, Rex's instincts were on high alert. A little girl stood alone, clutching her worn-out bear with unnerving calmness. But Rex wasn't fooled. His sharp senses detected something more, a hidden threat no one could see. As tensions grew, Rex's unwavering loyalty would soon save lives. But the question remains, what was inside that bear watch now? To uncover how Rex's bravery made all the difference. It was just another morning at the bustling airport. The sun had barely begun to rise, casting a soft golden glow through the large glass windows. Inside the terminal hummed with activity. The steady clink of rolling suitcases echoed through the hall, while the sound of soft chatter blended with the occasional overhead flight announcements. Passengers shuffled from one gate to another, some hurriedly checking in, others sipping coffee, their faces tired but content. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee, and the polished floors gleamed under the bright overhead lights. It seemed like any typical day at the airport. Travelers moved swiftly, some in pairs, others alone, all focused on reaching their destinations. A group of families gathered at a gate exchanging quiet smiles, while business travelers moved with purpose, their briefcases tucked firmly under their arms. In the background, a flight attendant greeted a family with a warm smile, and a couple of kids tugged at their parents' hands, pointing excitedly at the planes through the windows. But in the midst of this ordinary morning, something was about to happen that would shatter the calm routine. The sound of heavy synchronized footsteps interrupted the steady rhythm of the terminal. 15 police dogs, all German shepherds, trotted in perfect formation, their strong bodies gliding effortlessly beside their handlers. Leading the pack was Rex, a tall and imposing German shepherd, his deep brown eyes alert, scanning the crowd as they moved forward. His sleek coat shone in the dim light, his posture firm and focused. Behind him, his fellow canines followed closely, each dog carrying its own sense of duty. The team was here for a routine security sweep ahead of a high-profile arrival. This wasn't just any group of dogs. These were some of the best trained detection canines in the country, trained to sniff out explosives, narcotics, electronics, and even detect threats in crowds. Rex, the lead dog, had an instinct that was almost unnatural. His handler, Officer Mark Jensen, moved calmly at his side, his badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. Mark had done this countless times, moving through the terminals with his dogs, ensuring everything was safe and secure. But as the team walked, something was different today. Rex, usually stoic and focused, seemed more alert than usual. His ears twitched, his eyes scanning the crowd with a level of intensity that wasn't typical during routine sweeps. Mark, as always, trusted his dog's instincts. But he couldn't help but wonder, what was Rex sensing? What was different about today? In the midst of the bustling terminal, passengers continued with their routines, checking in, gathering their luggage, and chatting with loved ones, unaware that their world was about to change. It was still an ordinary morning, at least for now. The morning buzz in the terminal continued without disruption, but something unusual caught Rex's attention. As the team made their way through the busy crowd, his sharp eyes fixed on a small figure standing near Gate 12. A little girl no older than 4 was standing completely alone beside a luggage cart. She wasn't crying, nor was she calling for help. Her small hands gripped a worn-out stuffed bear, so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. The soft pink of her jacket seemed to glow under the bright light streaming through the windows. But her face was eerily calm, too calm for a child in such a busy place. People passed by without noticing her, at first caught up in their own world. But soon enough, some began to notice the little girl standing there in the middle of the terminal. Her stillness was unsettling, almost out of place amidst the hurried rush of travelers. No one seemed to know where she had come from or why she was standing there alone. There was no sign of her parents, no guardian, no one who seemed to be looking out for her. The more the crowd walked by, the more the little girl stood frozen, her wide eyes staring ahead, lost in the motion of the crowd, but seemingly untouched by it. Rex, walking just a few steps ahead of Officer Mark Jensen, began to slow down. His body, usually relaxed and fluid, became taut. His gaze locked on the little girl with a concentration that Mark had seen only a handful of times in their years of service together. Rex was always alert, but this was different. The dog didn't simply observe her. He watched her with a level of focus that felt almost unnatural. One by one, the other dogs in the unit began to react. Their noses lifted slightly, sniffing the air as they honed in on her, their bodies stiffening. There was a sudden shift in their movements. Something had captured their attention, and it wasn't just the little girl herself. Mark could feel the change in the atmosphere, the way the dogs' attention had sharpened, the way they were now more than just working dogs. They were on high alert. Mark exchanged a look with one of his fellow officers, but the man just shrugged, equally unsure of what was going on. Mark's eyes narrowed. Rex was never wrong. Something was out of place, and it wasn't just the girl. Still, the little girl stood motionless, clutching her bear, her face unreadable. As Rex's eyes never left her, Mark began to sense an unspoken shift in the air, something almost imperceptible but undeniably present. "Something's not right," Mark muttered, his voice low. He took a cautious step forward, his attention focused on the dog. It wasn't like Rex to be so intensely focused on something without reason. The tension was rising, and the silence in the terminal was slowly giving way to the heavy uncertainty Mark felt in his gut. The air in the terminal grew thicker with each passing second. Mark's gaze remained fixed on the little girl, who stood motionless, clutching her bear with white-knuckled hands. Despite the bustling crowds around her, she appeared untouched by the noise and chaos of the airport. It was as if she were in another world, one where the constant hum of activity didn't exist. Rex's eyes locked onto the girl with an intensity Mark had never seen before. The dog's usual calm demeanor had transformed into something more primal, more urgent. The rest of the K9 unit mirrored his behavior, their bodies stiffening, their noses twitching as they picked up something in the air. Mark took another cautious step forward, his heart beating faster now. There was an unsettling feeling in the pit of his stomach, one that only grew stronger as he approached the girl. "Hey there, sweetheart," Mark called out gently, kneeling down to her level. He tried to keep his voice calm, though he could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "Are you lost? Where are your parents?" The little girl didn't respond. She didn't even flinch. Her eyes were wide, her gaze distant, and the only movement was the faint twitch of her fingers against the stuffed bear she held so tightly. Mark felt a chill run down his spine. Something wasn't right, and he could feel it deep in his bones. The silence between them seemed to stretch endlessly, filling the air with a tension that Mark couldn't shake. The K9s were still locked onto her. Rex's posture remained tense, his gaze unwavering. He had always been a dog of few words, but when something was wrong, Mark knew. The dog's instincts were sharp, never wrong. But today, it was more than just a routine search. It was as if the dogs could sense a threat that no one else could see, something hidden beneath the surface, just out of reach. Mark's voice faltered slightly as he spoke again. "Sweetheart, it's okay. Where's your mommy or daddy?" Still no response. The atmosphere in the terminal shifted. It wasn't just the girl who had Mark's attention anymore. It was the strange sense of unease that had settled over the entire scene. The tension in the air was palpable, and Mark could feel the gaze of the K9s weighing on him, urging him to do something. He stood up, his eyes still fixed on the girl, unsure of what to do next. Suddenly, Rex let out a low growl. It was soft at first, a mere rumble in his chest, but it quickly grew louder, more urgent. The other dogs followed suit, their growls, harmonizing, forming a low, eerie chorus that cut through the silence of the terminal. Mark's heart skipped a beat. He stepped back instinctively, placing a hand on his gun, his eyes scanning the area. The canines were reacting to something. What was it? What were they sensing? The crowd around them began to notice the unusual behavior of the dogs, their confusion turning into panic. Some passengers stepped back, whispering in hushed voices, while others took out their phones, thinking they were witnessing a heartwarming moment of a lost child being found. But the air felt heavier now, charged with an unease that no one could explain. The tension in the air was undeniable, as the K9 unit continued to stand firm, their bodies taut with purpose. Rex, the lead dog, stood as a sentinel, his growl deepening into a warning. His hackles were raised, and his eyes locked onto the little girl with an intensity that made the hair on the back of Mark's neck stand up. This was no ordinary reaction. Rex was a well-trained police dog, but this level of alertness was beyond routine. Mark's commands to the dogs were met with silence. The usual obedience he had come to rely on was absent. Instead of following his orders, the dogs moved together in perfect unison, forming a tight protective circle around the little girl. Their bodies aligned, blocking anyone from approaching her. It was as if the dogs had decided their mission: protect the child, no matter the cost. Rex's growl grew louder, more urgent, echoing through the terminal. The rest of the dogs joined in their growls, rising in intensity until the sound became a coordinated symphony of warning. The rhythmic barking filled the air, sharp and commanding. It wasn't an attack. It was a shield. Mark's mind raced. Why were they reacting like this? He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him, as though the dogs were trying to communicate something he couldn't yet understand. His hand remained on his gun, his posture stiff, eyes darting around, searching for any sign of danger. But the area around them seemed clear. The passengers were still watching, but no one knew what to make of the scene unfolding before them. The passengers around the perimeter of the group began to back away, unsure of what to do. Some whispered to one another, their faces full of confusion and concern. Others pulled out their phones, assuming they were witnessing something heartwarming: a lost child being safely found by the dogs. But as the dogs continued their growls, the mood shifted. Fear began to ripple through the crowd. The uncertainty was palpable. "Is something wrong with the dog?" one passenger asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know," another responded clearly, unsettled. Why are they acting like that? The air was heavy now, thick with a sense of impending danger. Mark could feel it. The canines weren't reacting to the girl in the way they would if she were just lost. They were reacting to something deeper, something unseen. It was as though the girl wasn't the source of the danger, but a conduit for it. The more he observed, the more Mark began to realize that something was terribly wrong. Despite the growing anxiety among the people around them, the canines remained firm in their positions. Their formation never wavered, their focus entirely on the child. Mark could feel his heart rate quicken. Something was about to happen. The dogs knew it, and now he was starting to feel it too. The air in the terminal grew thick with tension, and Mark's unease deepened as he observed the chaos beginning to unfold around him. The quiet murmurs of confusion turned into louder whispers, then panic as passengers began to scatter. Some ran toward the exits, others stood frozen, their eyes darting nervously toward the K9 unit and the girl at the center of it all. Mark could hear the sharp squeals of rolling suitcases and the clattering of chairs as people rushed to make sense of the situation. But it was clear. No one understood what was happening. Still, the dogs remained in their positions, unmoving, their focus fixed entirely on the little girl. Rex stood at the forefront, his eyes locked onto her with unwavering attention. The other dogs in the unit, equally alert, stood like statues. Their ears raised, their eyes never leaving the child. Even as the surrounding chaos grew, the K9 unit stayed grounded, their formation unbroken, their bodies tense but controlled. Mark's heart pounded in his chest, his every instinct screaming that something was wrong. He could feel it deep in his gut, a sense of impending danger that he couldn't quite place. His mind raced, trying to piece together the events unfolding before him. The growls of the dogs were more than just reactions to a lost child. They were an alert to something far more sinister. The girl herself wasn't the threat. It was as if she was merely a trigger, a conduit for a danger none of them could see. The terminal felt suffocating. Mark felt the weight of the moment settling heavily on his shoulders. It was as if the entire room had gone still, frozen in anticipation. The K9s were reacting to something only they could sense, something hidden just beneath the surface. Mark could feel his pulse quicken as the situation intensified, yet he had no clear answers. He could only trust the instincts of his dogs. But even they seemed to be struggling with something they could not identify. Passengers continued to retreat further into the corners of the terminal, unsure of what to make of the scene. Some began to record the moment with their phones, capturing the surreal image of the K9s standing guard around the little girl. Others huddled together in small groups, exchanging whispered fears. Mark could hear fragments of their conversations as they speculated. Is it a bomb? Why are they acting like this? But no one had any real answers. Amidst the chaos, the K9s remained a constant and unyielding presence. Mark glanced at Rex once more. The dog's gaze had not shifted, his posture unyielding. He trusted Rex with his life, but even now there was something unnerving about the dog's behavior. What were they sensing? What did they know that he didn't? Mark stepped closer to the girl, his instincts telling him that whatever was happening, it was escalating fast. The air was thick with uncertainty, and Mark knew deep down that the threat was real. But what was it? The tension in the terminal was palpable, a thick cloud hanging over the scene. Mark took another slow step toward the little girl, his eyes fixed on Rex. The lead dog remained steadfast, his gaze unwavering, but there was something more in his expression now. Something primal. He wasn't just observing anymore. He was reacting as if something had triggered a deep instinct within him. Rex's eyes shifted from the girl to the stuffed bear she clutched tightly. It was a subtle change, but Mark noticed it immediately. The dog's ears flicked forward, his body tensing slightly. Mark knew Rex's behavior well, and he could tell that the dog was no longer simply following his commands. He was warning. The others followed suit, their postures stiffening as they too turned their attention toward the bear. Mark's heartbeat quickened. It was then that he realized the dogs weren't just reacting to the girl. They were focused on something far more troubling, something hidden within the bear. Mark's eyes narrowed as he scanned the scene, trying to make sense of it. What was it? Why were Rex and the others so fixated on it? He moved slowly, careful not to startle the girl. She remained still, clutching the bear with a look of distant confusion in her eyes. She was no longer the focus of Mark's attention. His eyes were now trained on the stuffed toy. From a distance, it seemed like an ordinary teddy bear, well-worn, soft, with a button eye slightly loose from age. It didn't seem like much, but Mark knew better than to trust appearances. Rex's low growl echoed in the silence, drawing Mark's attention back to the dog. The growl wasn't aggressive. It was cautious, controlled like a warning to something unseen. Mark stepped closer to the girl, his hand hovering near the bear. His mind raced, but he knew he had to be careful. Whatever was inside that bear, it was causing Rex and the rest of the dogs to react as though they were on the scent of something dangerous. Mark squatted down his fingers, brushing lightly against the bear's fur. It felt cold, almost unnaturally so, like it had been sitting in an icebox. He gently lifted the bear from the girl's grasp. She didn't protest, her hands still trembling slightly, her eyes wide with confusion. Mark turned the bear over in his hands, inspecting it more closely. The worn fabric, the missing button eye, all appeared normal. But as he held it, something felt wrong. His fingers brushed over a small hard edge inside the bear's body. Mark's stomach sank. He could feel the shape of a foreign object hidden beneath the seams, something solid, something that didn't belong. He turned the bear over again, looking for any signs of stitching or seams that might indicate something hidden within. His heart rate increased as he carefully pried open a section of the bear's stitching. A small electronic device no bigger than a coin slipped out from the soft fabric. Mark's pulse spiked. The object was covered in a thin metallic casing, and as he inspected it more closely, he realized with horror that it was a small portable tracker. His mind raced. It wasn't a bomb, but it was no less dangerous. Someone had planted this device inside the bear, using the child as an unwitting courier. The tension in the terminal thickened as Mark continued to examine the bear. The K9s, who had been standing perfectly still moments ago, now began to react more intensely. Their growls grew louder, more urgent, vibrating through the air like a warning. Rex at the forefront had his head low, eyes fixed on the bear in Mark's hands, his body quivering with restrained energy. The other dogs mirrored him, their muscles taut, as if sensing the danger within the toy. Mark's fingers tightened around the small metallic device he had discovered inside the bear. The tiny tracker seemed harmless at first glance. But the more he studied it, the more he realized it wasn't just a simple piece of technology. It was part of a much larger threat. His instincts screamed that this was no ordinary security breach. It wasn't a bomb, but it could very well be a piece of a more insidious plan, a tool for tracking or monitoring. Rex's growl deepened, matching the unease growing inside Mark. The dog's behavior had shifted from protective to outright defensive, a stark sign that there was something far more dangerous lurking beneath the surface. Mark's heart pounded in his chest as his mind raced, piecing together the situation. The tracker was active, likely transmitting location data. And whoever had planted it inside the bear had done so with careful precision. Mark quickly pulled the bear apart further, trying to assess whether there were more devices hidden inside. His movements were swift, though controlled. The last thing he needed was to make a mistake and cause unnecessary panic. The device itself was simple in design, but its implications were anything but. If this was part of a coordinated attack, the airport was in more danger than anyone had realized. As Mark examined the device further, Rex's low growl broke through his thoughts, and the other K9s joined in with synchronized barks. They weren't just reacting to the girl anymore. They were reacting to the threat, to the very presence of this device, as if they could sense the danger it posed long before any human could. Mark quickly stood up, holding the bear carefully in one hand, while motioning for his team to stay alert. He wasn't sure how bad the situation was, but he knew it was escalating fast. The K9s weren't just on alert. They were ready to act, and Mark could feel the urgency in their behavior. He stood still for a moment, considering his options. There was no time to waste. The device needed to be examined by experts immediately. But for now, the immediate concern was the safety of everyone around him. Mark turned to face the K9 unit. "Stay sharp," he ordered, his voice calm but firm. "We need to protect this girl and keep everyone else out of harm's way." The terminal erupted into chaos. Mark's pulse spiked as the magnitude of the situation finally hit him. The device hidden within the bear had turned what was supposed to be a normal day into a nightmare. The K9s continued to react, their growls and barks now a steady chorus of alarm, but Mark knew that the true threat was still unknown. As his eyes darted around, he could see the growing panic among the passengers. The once orderly terminal was now a scene of confusion as people rushed toward the exits, knocking into each other, some crying out in fear, others shouting to be let out. "Everyone stay calm," shouted a voice from the security team. But it was too late. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed, and people were scattering in all directions, desperate to get away from whatever had triggered the dogs. The air was thick with tension and uncertainty. Mark could feel the chaos swirling around him, but his focus remained unbroken. The situation was escalating faster than he could manage. Mark raised his voice above the commotion, barking orders to his team. "Stay in position," he commanded. "Don't let anyone get near the girl." His voice was steady, but his mind raced. As the canines continued to growl and bark, Mark realized the severity of the threat. This was no accident. The tracker was a piece of a much larger puzzle, one that was clearly meant to cause harm. In the distance, Mark could hear the sharp wail of sirens as more security officers and emergency responders arrived at the scene. They were still trying to make sense of the situation, but the canines had already given their verdict. The danger wasn't just looming, it was imminent. Mark's gut told him that they weren't just dealing with an isolated threat. This was bigger, much bigger than he had first realized. The surrounding passengers were now trapped in the chaos, unsure of whether they were in danger or not. Some had started to record the scene on their phones. Others were hurriedly calling their loved ones, trying to find out what was going on. The atmosphere had gone from calm to chaotic in mere minutes, and no one knew how to process it. Mark turned his attention back to the girl. She stood there, unmoving, still clutching her bear. Despite the noise and the fear in the air, she hadn't made a sound. The only thing that seemed to calm her was the unbroken circle of canines around her. Mark knew the danger wasn't just to her, but to everyone in the terminal. "Check the surrounding areas," Mark ordered sharply. "We need to know if there are more threats." His voice was firm, his tone decisive. It was time to act, and the canines weren't about to wait any longer. The noise in the terminal had reached a fever pitch. The canines, led by Rex, continued to bark with increasing urgency, their protective circle around the little girl growing tighter. Their growls were now joined by the frantic calls of security officers and the sound of footsteps rushing down the terminal hallway. Everyone seemed on edge. Passengers backing away, some frozen in place, unsure whether to flee or wait. Others, gripped by a deep sense of fear, kept checking their phones, hoping for some explanation, some sign that the chaos would soon end. Mark's mind raced as he surveyed the scene. The canines were still alert, not once breaking formation, their eyes trained on the girl. The dogs weren't just reacting to her. They were responding to a danger neither Mark nor the passengers could yet understand. Their behavior had changed entirely. They were no longer just searching. They were defending, as if their very instincts had detected something none of them could see. The surrounding atmosphere in the terminal was one of confusion and growing panic. Passengers, unsure of what was happening, began to ask questions, but the fear in their voices only amplified the tension in the air. Mark could hear fragments of their frantic exchanges. "Is there a bomb? Are we in danger?" The uncertainty was tangible, thickening the air and making it almost suffocating. Mark stayed focused on his team, his eyes scanning the area, looking for any signs of additional threats. His heart was heavy with the weight of responsibility. He needed to keep his team and the people in the terminal safe, but the danger was still undefined. The dogs' reactions weren't just precautionary. They were urgent. As more security officers arrived, their hurried steps only added to the confusion. Some of them were already trying to calm down the panicked passengers, urging them to stay back and move toward the exits, while others began to assess the scene. Officers scanned the area, trying to determine the source of the threat. But their efforts seemed futile in the face of the canine unit's unwavering focus. The canines' growls continued to fill the air, sharp and guttural. Rex, still at the front, was positioned perfectly between the girl and any potential threat, his body stiff with resolve. The other dogs mirrored him, their heads low, eyes locked on the girl and the surrounding space. Mark could feel the weight of their collective focus on him. The dogs were ready for anything, but Mark needed to understand what was happening. He needed answers before the situation spiraled even further. Mark's voice cut through the chaos. "Stay sharp," he barked at his team. "We're not leaving until we know what's going on." He watched as the K9 unit stayed in place, guarding the girl as if nothing would make them budge. Every instinct in Mark told him that the threat was closer than they thought. He just didn't know how or where it would strike. The chaos in the terminal reached a fever pitch. As more security officers flooded in, the situation became harder to control. Their hurried steps echoed against the polished floors, but their presence only heightened the tension. The passengers, now more frightened than ever, continued to shuffle toward the exits, their faces etched with confusion and fear. Some muttered in disbelief, still unsure of what was happening, while others shouted at each other, asking if it was safe to leave. Mark stood among the confusion, his eyes never leaving the K9 unit, which remained perfectly still, their focus unwavering. Rex was still at the forefront, positioned between the girl and the rest of the world. His growls had become more intense, a low, guttural sound that sent chills down Mark's spine. He could sense the weight of the dog's instincts, feeling that the threat was closer than anyone could imagine. Mark's training as a handler told him that the K9s were picking up on something dangerous, something none of them could see yet. "Let's move quickly," Mark said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Everyone clear the area, but keep an eye on the girl. We need to inspect that bear now." Mark crouched down near the girl, carefully taking the bear from her grasp. She didn't resist, her wide eyes still distant, unblinking. Her fingers trembled as she let the bear go, clutching it like a lifeline. Mark's focus shifted to the toy as he started to carefully inspect it, his fingers tracing the seams of the worn fabric. His mind raced as he scanned every inch of the bear. Rex, still positioned nearby, continued to growl, his sharp eyes following Mark's every move. As Mark prodded the bear with his gloved fingers, something caught his attention. A faint metallic sound, like the ticking of a watch coming from deep inside. His heart dropped. It wasn't just a stuffed toy. It was a vessel for something much more sinister. Mark's hands went steady as he carefully pulled at the seams, revealing a small metallic object embedded inside the bear. A bomb. His pulse quickened. It wasn't just a tracker, it was a device that could detonate. Mark froze for a moment, his eyes locked on the object. This was no longer just a security breach. This was an attack in the making. If that device went off, the entire terminal would be caught in the blast. Panic spread through Mark's body like wildfire. But he couldn't afford to lose control. Not yet. He turned to the security officers, his voice urgent. "We have a bomb. Evacuate the terminal. Now. I need backup, and I need it fast." The officers scrambled into action, their faces grim as they began shouting orders to clear the area. As the K9s continued their protective stance, Mark could feel the weight of the moment settle over him. He wasn't just protecting the girl anymore. He was protecting everyone in the terminal. But the danger wasn't over yet. The device still had to be neutralized. The air in the terminal had shifted from confusion to fear. As Mark stood holding the bear and the device, his mind raced with the realization of what they were dealing with. The K9s, still on high alert, had formed a tight barrier around the girl. They weren't moving, they weren't even twitching, their eyes locked in place as they maintained their defensive stance. Rex was the first to react when any passenger tried to approach. With a low growl, the large German shepherd bared his teeth, a clear warning for anyone who came too close. The other dogs followed suit, each one forming an impenetrable wall around the girl, their stance unwavering, their eyes alert to every movement. The protective instinct in Rex was palpable. He wasn't just a working dog. He was a guardian, and right now his focus was solely on keeping the girl safe. Mark, standing just behind the canines, could see the fear in the eyes of the passengers as they moved away from the dogs, instinctively retreating to the outer edges of the terminal. No one dared approach the girl now, not with 15 of the most highly trained canines in the country standing guard. Mark's heart swelled with pride for his unit, but he knew this wasn't over yet. The device inside the bear was just the beginning of something much bigger, and he had to act fast. The tension in the terminal had reached its peak. Security officers were now moving in a coordinated effort to clear the area, ushering passengers toward the exits, shouting for everyone to remain calm and follow the evacuation protocol. The once bustling airport had come to a near standstill, the hum of activity replaced by the sound of hurried footsteps and muffled voices. But in the middle of it all, Mark felt a strange sense of clarity. His eyes never left the canines. They were his responsibility just as much as the girl, and they were ready for whatever came next. Rex's growl grew deeper, more urgent. The dog's eyes flicked toward Mark as if asking for confirmation. Mark nodded, understanding the message. The danger was far from over. As the security team moved toward the bomb squad and began setting up perimeters, Mark's instincts told him they weren't just protecting the girl from a threat inside the bear. The canines had already detected something else, something that was still lurking nearby. He could feel it in the air, that prickling sensation that came before disaster struck. The canines remained perfectly still, eyes scanning every person and every corner of the terminal. Their loyalty was beyond question. They weren't just following orders. They were protecting instinctively. They were more than just dogs. They were the last line of defense. The air in the terminal remained thick with tension, and despite the bomb threat being discovered, Mark's gut told him that the worst was still ahead. As the security team moved to secure the area, coordinating with the bomb squad, Mark's attention remained fixed on the canines. Rex, in particular, had not let his guard down for a second. The dog's eyes were sharp, scanning the crowd, scanning every movement, every shadow, as if the threat was still out there just beyond his reach. The canines began to shift their positions, their bodies tense, their heads turning toward the large windows of the terminal. Mark watched them closely. Something was off. Rex's ears flicked forward, his nostrils flaring as he sniffed the air. He was picking up on something. Something beyond the immediate danger of the girl and the bear. Suddenly, Rex let out a low growl, his body taut with restrained energy. Mark's heart skipped. He knew that growl. It was a sign of danger. The dogs had detected something else. Mark's radio crackled to life. "Mark, we've got movement outside. Something's not right. It's not over." Mark's eyes shifted to the large glass windows, his heart racing. Outside, a black van was parked near the service entrance. It had been there for a while, but now it was beginning to move. The van's engine roared to life, and it slowly began to drive along the perimeter of the airport. Its windows tinted its movements slow and deliberate. "That van," Mark muttered, his voice tight. "They're still out there. The threat isn't gone." He quickly motioned for his team. "Stay focused. Keep the area clear. The threat has shifted outside, and we need to stay one step ahead." Mark turned to the canines, who were still keeping their formation around the girl. Their unwavering loyalty was apparent. They weren't going anywhere, not until they knew she was safe. Rex's growl deepened as the van inched closer to the airport's perimeter, stopping just outside the main entrance. The rest of the canines joined in their collective warning, signaling that something wasn't right. Mark could feel his blood run cold. This wasn't a coincidence. Whoever was behind this wasn't going to stop. As the bomb squad continued its work inside, Mark's attention was drawn to the black van. It had now come to a complete stop. But there was no doubt in Mark's mind. The people inside the van had something planned, and it wasn't over yet. His instincts screamed that the threat was moving closer. He turned to the security officers and quickly relayed orders. "We need eyes on that van. Get a tactical team on the perimeter now." The air outside the airport was now just as charged with tension as inside. Mark's mind raced as he quickly orchestrated his team coordinating with the tactical units to set up surveillance around the black van. Every second mattered. He knew they had only a brief window to prevent whatever plan the attackers had from unfolding. The K-9s, still locked in their protective formation around the little girl, gave Mark a silent promise that they would not back down. Rex's growl continued to reverberate through the air, a constant reminder that the threat was real and the clock was ticking. The security officers had already moved into position, their eyes trained on the van outside. Every member of the tactical team was assigned a specific angle, their communications swift and efficient. Mark's eyes flicked between his unit and the perimeter, his mind shifting gears. While the bomb squad worked frantically inside, Mark's primary focus was ensuring the safety of everyone in the terminal and, most urgently, the little girl. Time seemed to stretch, each passing moment more tense than the last. Mark could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on him. His gut told him that the danger wasn't just looming, it was closing in, and they had to act before it was too late. The K-9s remained vigilant, their bodies tense, their focus unwavering, as they continued to surround the girl, blocking any attempt for anyone to get too close. Their loyalty to their charge was absolute. Eyes on the van. "Move quickly," Mark ordered again, trying to keep the pressure off his team, but knowing that everyone was feeling it. The K-9's sharp senses were still picking up on every movement, every shift in the crowd around them. Mark's heart rate increased as the tactical team signaled they were ready. But still, no one had moved inside the van. Whoever was inside was waiting for something. Mark couldn't afford to waste another second. The sound of footsteps quickly approached, followed by the voice of the bomb squad leader on Mark's radio. "Mark, the device is almost neutralized. We've got a couple more minutes." But even as the bomb squad worked inside, Mark felt his sense of urgency growing. The K-9s continued to stand firm, their patience almost as strong as their training. Mark turned to Rex, and for a brief moment their eyes met. Rex, though calm, was still poised to react to any threat. His body remained tight, his posture one of controlled readiness. Mark knew that Rex would never waver. Outside the airport, the tension had reached a boiling point. The K-9s, alongside the security officers, were moving swiftly toward the perimeter, where the black van had stopped, but the criminals inside weren't waiting idly. As the tactical team and Mark's unit closed in, the van's engine roared to life, and the vehicle quickly sped off, tires screeching as it darted down the runway access road. The pursuit had begun. Mark's heart raced as he barked orders to his team, urging them to stay focused. "We can't lose them. Stay with the van. Don't let them get away." His voice was a controlled command, but the urgency was clear. The criminals were escaping, but not without leaving something behind. Mark's mind raced, piecing together the connections as the K-9s continued to growl, their instincts pushing them to stay alert. Outside, the scene was unfolding into pure chaos. Officers scrambled, yelling into their radios, trying to intercept the van. The sirens wailed, blending with the roar of engines and the sounds of frantic commands. Mark knew the criminals were desperate now, and desperation made them dangerous. The K-9s, on the other hand, remained remarkably focused. Even though the chaos raged around them, the dogs stayed locked in position, their loyalty to the girl unwavering. They continued to protect her, a physical and emotional shield that no one dared to approach. Mark trusted them with his life, and he could see that their instincts were in full force. Amidst the pursuit, Mark's radio crackled with an urgent message. "Mark, we've got something on the surveillance footage from the parking lot. The van is connected to a military contractor. We think this is more than just a random attack." The revelation hit Mark like a punch to the gut. this wasn't just about the girl. It was about something much bigger. The criminals weren't acting alone. The girl and her family were tangled in something far deeper. Something connected to national security. His mind raced as the puzzle pieces fell into place. The bear, the tracker, the bomb. It all pointed to one thing, an orchestrated attack with this young girl caught in the middle. With this new information, the stakes were much higher than anyone had realized. Mark turned to the K9s, his voice low but urgent. Stay with her. We'll finish this outside. The tension reached its peak as the criminals in the black van tried to escape. But no matter how fast they drove, they couldn't outrun the combined force of Mark's team and the K9 unit. The sirens blared, the tires screeched, and the roar of engines echoed through the streets as the pursuit continued. Mark's mind was focused laser-sharp on the task at hand. The criminals were getting desperate, and with desperation came recklessness. They would make a mistake soon, Mark knew it. Then a breakthrough. Mark's radio crackled to life. We've got them cornered. The van's been stopped near the south exit. We have them. Mark's heart skipped a beat. Move in now. He ordered, his voice calm but firm. His instincts were right. This was the moment. The criminals had nowhere left to run. Within moments, tactical units descended on the van, surrounding it from all sides. The criminals inside attempted to make a run for it. But they were no match for the coordinated effort of Mark's team and the K9s. Rex, leading the charge, barked loudly, his tail held high with pride and focus as he closed in on the suspects. With a swift command from Mark, Rex lunged forward, his training kicking in as he restrained one of the criminals. In mere seconds, the remaining criminals were apprehended. Officers swarmed the van, pulling out the men who had been responsible for the chaos. The K9s circled their bodies, still tense, their loyalty to the mission unwavering. As the criminals were arrested, Mark allowed himself a small breath of relief. Inside the terminal, the air began to shift. The chaos was slowly subsiding as the last of the passengers were escorted out of harm's way. The bomb squad had neutralized the device inside the bear, and the immediate threat was over. Mark walked back to the girl, who was now in the care of one of the officers, her wide eyes still filled with confusion. Rex, still alert, trotted up to her side. The little girl looked down at the dog, a small smile creeping onto her face for the first time. "Thank you," she whispered softly, her tiny hand reaching out to pet Rex's fur. The bond between them, forged in a moment of danger, was something Mark would never forget. As Mark stood there, watching Rex and the K9 unit continue to stand guard, the reality of what had just transpired sank in. The threat had been stopped. The girl was safe. The mother, who had been frantically searching for her daughter, was now rushing toward them, tears of relief streaming down her face. Mark stepped back, giving them space. He could hear the cheers and applause erupting from the security team and the other officers as they realized the magnitude of what had just been prevented. In that moment, Mark felt a surge of pride for his K9s, for Rex, who had saved more lives than anyone could count. As the last echoes of the chaos faded, the atmosphere in the terminal slowly began to shift. The airport, which had been engulfed in fear and confusion, was now filled with a renewed sense of relief and gratitude. Mark stood among his team, the weight of the situation lifting from his shoulders as he watched the passengers slowly resume their normal routines, still in awe of the events that had just unfolded. The K9 unit, led by Rex, had earned a place in everyone's hearts. Officers, security personnel, and even the passengers couldn't help but admire the courage and loyalty displayed by the dogs. They weren't just trained animals. They were protectors, heroes. Mark felt a swelling of pride as he heard the murmurs of admiration. Some passengers came up to him, clapping him on the back, their eyes filled with gratitude. Others approached Rex, gently petting the dog's fur, their faces bright with smiles. "Good job, Rex," one officer exclaimed, his voice full of pride. "You saved us all." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that resonated deeply within Mark. Rex had indeed saved lives today, but so had every member of the K9 unit. Together, they had prevented an unimaginable disaster. It was a bond that went beyond handler and dog. It was a partnership built on trust, instinct, and love. As the news of the rescue spread throughout the airport, it didn't take long for the story to make its way into the media. Footage of Rex and the other K9s standing guard around the little girl quickly went viral. The world saw the bravery of the dogs, their unshakable commitment to protecting human life, and their unwavering focus in the face of danger. News outlets, social media platforms, and even local television stations began to cover the heroic rescue, and the story of Rex's bravery spread across the globe. Headlines such as "Hero Dogs Save the Day" and "The Loyalty of Rex." A K9's unmatched courage flooded news feeds, and millions of people found inspiration in the actions of a dog who had risked everything to protect an innocent child. The K9 unit became a symbol of courage, resilience, and loyalty, virtues that transcended species. Mark was often asked for interviews, his calm and steady demeanor admired by viewers, but it was clear that the true hero of the day was Rex. And just as Mark thought the whirlwind was coming to an end, another request came through. A request that would bring the emotional journey to a beautiful, unexpected conclusion. The day after the chaos had subsided, Mark and Rex found themselves at the hospital walking slowly down the sterile corridor. Despite the previous whirlwind of interviews and media attention, Mark felt a sense of peace wash over him as they approached the room where the little girl and her mother awaited. He could hear soft voices ahead, but it was the gentle sound of Rex's paws on the floor that brought a sense of calm to the atmosphere. As they entered the room, the girl's mother, Emily, stood up immediately, her eyes red but filled with deep gratitude. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at Mark and Rex. I just can't believe you're both here," she whispered, her voice trembling. Thank you. Thank you for saving my daughter. I don't know what would have happened without you." Rex, ever gentle and patient, stepped forward, his tail wagging lightly. The little girl, Lily, sat on the bed, her eyes wide with wonder. When she saw Rex, her face lit up, and she slowly reached out her small hands, her voice soft, but filled with a sense of joy. "Rex," she whispered, her voice full of awe. Rex immediately nuzzled his head into her tiny hands, and Lily giggled, a sound Mark hadn't heard from her since the terrifying moments at the airport. The connection between them was immediate and pure, formed in the chaos of the previous day, but now realized in this quiet, tender moment. Emily knelt down beside her daughter, her arms wrapping around Lily in a tight embrace, while Rex continued to sit patiently at their feet. Mark watched the scene unfold in front of him, his heart swelling with emotion. The bond between Rex and the girl was undeniable. It was a bond forged not just through training, but through an instinctive, protective love that transcended words. Emily turned to Mark, her eyes filled with more gratitude than words could express. "You and Rex, you saved us," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "You gave us back our lives. I will never be able to thank you enough." Mark smiled softly, feeling the weight of the moment. "It was Rex who did the hard part," he said, his voice low. "He's the real hero." The room fell into a peaceful silence, the only sound being the gentle hum of the machines around them. Emily stroked Rex's fur, her fingers brushing through his thick coat. She looked at Mark, then back at Rex, her expression filled with awe. "You're both incredible. I'll never forget what you've done for us." Mark simply nodded, knowing that nothing he said could fully convey the magnitude of what had just happened. What mattered now was that the girl was safe. The nightmare had ended, and she had her mother by her side again. The bond between them, their reunion, was everything. And Rex, ever watchful, ever loyal, was their protector. As the story of Rex and the K9 unit continued to spread, people began to understand the vital role these dogs played in keeping society safe. What had started as a routine security check at the airport had transformed into a life-saving operation thanks to the unwavering loyalty, courage, and instinct of these remarkable animals. Rex, in particular, became a symbol of selfless service and dedication. His actions, which had once been instinctive, were now seen by millions as heroic. The bond between Rex and Mark, forged over years of training and trust, was evident to everyone who watched the footage. But it was Rex's bond with the little girl Lily that captured hearts around the world. He had not only protected her physically, but had also provided a sense of calm during a moment of overwhelming fear. His presence, silent and strong, had kept her safe, even in the face of the unknown. Across the globe, news outlets, social media, and even ordinary people in cafes, parks, and homes were talking about Rex. People were sharing stories of their own pets, of their own connections with animals, inspired by the heroism they had witnessed. Rex's loyalty was celebrated, and so too was the loyalty of every K9 in the unit. These dogs, often working behind the scenes, were now being recognized for their silent but powerful contributions to society. Mark, who had always been humble, found himself standing at the forefront of a wave of gratitude and recognition. It wasn't just the officers and the security team that were being celebrated. It was the K9s. The dogs had done the hard part, and now the world was acknowledging their vital role. In the midst of all the applause, Mark stood quietly, his thoughts with Rex and the other dogs who, despite their newfound fame, remained humble and focused on the task at hand. Rex and the other K9s had earned their place as heroes, but Mark knew that their true strength lay in their loyalty and their dedication. They had not hesitated when faced with danger. They had acted instinctively, guided by their training and an unshakable commitment to protect. And in that moment, Mark realized that these dogs, these unsung heroes, were more than just working animals. They were symbols of the power of love, protection, and the unwavering bond between humans and their loyal companions. As the media frenzy around Rex and the K9 unit continued, Mark couldn't help but reflect on the deeper message that had emerged from the events of that day. The world had seen the courage, the bravery, and the heroism of the K9s. But it was their unwavering loyalty that had truly defined the story. These dogs, trained to protect and serve, had given their all without hesitation. They had acted on instinct, guided by the deep bond they shared with their handlers, but also by something more profound, an inherent desire to protect and care for those in need. Rex had not only saved the girl, but had become a symbol of loyalty and dedication. His actions, along with the rest of the K9 unit, had touched hearts across the world, inspiring countless people to reflect on the meaning of loyalty. For Mark, Rex's loyalty had been the cornerstone of their success. It wasn't just about doing their job. It was about doing it with love, with devotion, and without expectation of reward. It was about the unspoken bond that connected Rex to the people he protected. Mark couldn't help but marvel at the transformative power of loyalty. The little girl Lily and her family had been forever changed by Rex's actions. Her mother, once frantic with worry, was now able to hold her daughter close, knowing that they had been saved not only by human hands, but by a dog's loyalty. That bond between them, though silent, was undeniable. Rex had bridged the gap between animal and human, proving that the capacity for love and protection transcends species. Across the globe, people were talking about loyalty. People were learning about the K9 unit's role in saving lives. The story was more than just a heroic rescue. It was a reminder of how loyalty, in its purest form, could change the course of lives. Rex and his fellow K9s had brought attention to the often overlooked role that service animals play in society. Their dedication, their sacrifice, and their love had resonated with everyone who heard their story. Mark felt a deep sense of pride not just for Rex, but for every K9 that had ever stepped into a life-threatening situation with unwavering courage. It was loyalty that had saved lives that day, and it was loyalty that would continue to inspire others long after the applause had faded. The story of that fateful day at the airport had rippled far beyond the walls of the terminal. It had started with an ordinary morning, a child and her stuffed bear, and a routine security check. But what followed was nothing short of extraordinary. The quick reactions of the K9 unit, led by Rex, had not only saved a young girl's life, but had changed the lives of everyone involved. It was a reminder that sometimes heroes come in forms we least expect, and loyalty, in its purest form, is the most powerful force of all. Mark stood back now, looking at Rex, the dog who had become more than just a colleague. He had become a hero, a symbol of the unconditional love and devotion that animals are capable of. The bond between Mark and his K9 unit had always been strong, but that day it was cemented in the most profound way. Rex had acted without hesitation, driven by his instincts to protect, and his actions had made all the difference. The little girl Lily and her mother Emily were finally safe. The chaos had subsided and the threat had been neutralized, but the lessons learned would live on forever. Emily held her daughter tightly, her gratitude to Rex and Mark palpable. She had witnessed firsthand the kind of loyalty that could only be found in animals. It wasn't just Mark who had saved her family. It was Rex with his dedication and selfless courage who had made it possible for them to be together again. In that moment, Emily understood something she would carry with her for the rest of her life. Love and protection don't always come from the people we expect, but sometimes from those who are loyal beyond measure. As the story of Rex's heroism spread across the globe, the world was reminded of the profound impact animals have on our lives. It wasn't just the K9 unit's courage that captured people's hearts. It was the message they carried with them, that loyalty, sacrifice, and love are not confined to humans alone. Animals too can be our protectors, our guardians, our unsung heroes. They don't ask for recognition, nor do they seek reward. They act purely out of love and a deep-rooted sense of duty. Mark's heart swelled with pride, not for himself, but for Rex and the other K9s who had stood by him that day. Their loyalty had not only saved lives, it had touched the hearts of millions and reminded them of the simple yet profound truth. The love between humans and animals can transcend the ordinary and reach into the extraordinary. As Mark walked away from the hospital, his hand resting on Rex's head, he knew this story wasn't just about one rescue. It was about the transformative power of loyalty, the silent strength that animals bring into our lives. And for the rest of his life, Mark would carry with him the memory of the day when Rex and the K9 unit had not just saved a little girl. They had reminded the world of the quiet heroes who walk alongside us every day, silently protecting us with their loyalty and love. The story of Rex and the K9 unit serves as a powerful reminder of the incredible bond between humans and animals and the life-changing impact of loyalty and love. Through Rex's courageous actions, we are shown that animals, particularly our loyal companions like the German Shepherd, are more than just pets. They are protectors, guardians, and true heroes in their own right. This story highlights the importance of treating animals with the love and respect they deserve. Their loyalty, dedication, and ability to sense danger before we do are just a few of the qualities that make them invaluable members of our lives. Rex, with his unwavering commitment to the girl and the K9 unit, reminds us of the silent strength that animals offer us every day. It's a lesson in how love and sacrifice transcend species, showing us that protection and care can come from unexpected places. By honoring the role of animals like Rex, we are reminded of the power of unconditional love. The story encourages us to be more compassionate, to value the relationships we share with animals, and to recognize that their contributions go far beyond companionship. They save lives. In a world that often overlooks the quiet heroes, Rex and the K9 unit stand as a testament to the extraordinary impact animals can have. Their loyalty reminds us that love, in its truest form, asks for nothing in return. It's about devotion, protection, and an unbreakable bond that can change lives forever. Through this story, we are all encouraged to open our hearts to the amazing, selfless animals who walk beside us, protecting and loving us in ways we may never fully comprehend.